We're back! Before we get started, I just wanted to say hello, because we've had a little bit of a break from publishing new Science Baby podcast episodes, but we are back and we've got some corkers for you in 2026. So stick with us, and if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with your friends, because we know there are loads of people out there that want to know all of this nerdy science that we're talking about. Give us a review on your favourite podcast listening app, and watch this space. We're going to have some fantastic baby science coming up. It does just seem like this big towering monster of scientific mystery.
That's a really good way of putting it.
But in the vast majority of IVF cases, that's not the case. That's not what's happening.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's mental. I thought it was.
Yes, most people do, yeah. If money is no object and you have your private doctor on call, feel free. Just do that call up and say, hey, I'm sick of having sex with my husband. Let's try a different way. That's not usually how it happens, but...
We're literally going to take all the eggs, put them into this one basket.
Exactly, literally.
Quite literally. Okay.
That transfer didn't work for us.
Whoa! Okay, plot twist.
Plot twist, pew! Opens your legs up on the stirrups, turns on a floodlight, shining at your business end. Speculum, open up. I mean, good God, if you had any propriety before, abandon all hope ye who enter here. You're listening to the Science Baby podcast with me, Leila.
And me, Kim.
We're two nerdy mums who've researched the crap out of parenthood.
Seriously, you do not want to see our internet search histories.
Each episode, we chat about the why behind pregnancy, birth, and everything that comes after.
Because babies don't come with a manual, but with one born every minute, we reckon we can figure it out.
Hello, friend.
Hello. How are you feeling?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. This is the start of a better week than last week.
Hurrah.
For both of us.
For both of us, yes. Although I managed to round off last week with a second bout of vomiting. This time entirely self-induced.
Was it food or liquid?
I'm choosing
consumption?
to believe it was the chow mein, and definitely not the nearly 2 bottles of wine that I had.
Oh, mate. That's rough. How many days was the hangover?
2 days. 2-day hangover.
Okay, that's pretty good, for no offence, but for our age.
It is not too bad. I was very cross with myself. It wasn't 2 bottles of wine. I was like, it's 1 bottle of wine and another glass. Oh, and then I had another glass and a strong beer. Okay, fine. So, yeah. So I was quite cross that such a small amount of alcohol could completely floor me. Doug took Felix so I could have a lunchtime nap before I had to take him to gymnastics, because the thought of, I know.
That's not worth it, is it?
It was kill or cure, and it did cure in the end, but goodness me. And then the second day was just the worst brain fog in the world. I felt like I was clawing through molasses in my own brain, nothing is moving. Anyway, we're back. We're back in the room. Everything's great.
Back in the room. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I went to sleep a couple of hours later than normal the other day and woke up with a hangover. Hadn't not drunk anything.
Nice.
It's not fair. That's what I have to say about that.
It's not fair being old.
Oh, God. I am so excited to talk about what we're talking about, because we have attempted this multiple times.
Yes.
And the universe has said absolutely fucking not.
I don't know if I'm just manifesting avoidance.
This is all your fault.
This is all my fault. I feel like it's my unwillingness to tackle the big elephant in the room, i.e. the trauma in my brain, just manifesting into reality, like it just can't happen. But there we are. So we're talking about IVF.
IVF! Oh, I'm so excited.
Yes. So Science Baby is a science baby. He's an IVF baby. He was born as a result of a frozen embryo transfer. So we'll get into all of that. But yeah, basically, dear listeners, if you've not heard the previous episodes, I had a very long fertility journey, somewhat confused by COVID, but not as much as you might imagine. And so, yeah, after 8 years, we finally started IVF treatment. And we were fortunate that we didn't have to go through too long IVF treatment, but we did go through IVF treatment, a frozen embryo transfer. And so we thought it would be a good idea to kind of just intro that, right?
Absolutely, because we hear IVF all the time. oh, she's doing IVF. She's, you know, like, oh, how many rounds have you got? Blah, blah, blah. I feel like everyone has a really top level knowledge, but just researching this for this episode, I've learned that there's so much to it and so many options and things to do with it that I didn't even know were involved. And I'm sure that that is times a million when you actually embark on the process. You know, it must be a very steep learning curve. So I would really appreciate starting with the basics. And I think a lot of people out there, they're kind of there as well. Like, right, how do I get into this?
Yeah, exactly. Because it does sound like quite a scary process from the outside, but we were just kind of putting our one foot in front of the other, and it just became a natural next thing to try. But when we started to research what it actually involved, it became like this all-consuming thing of like, well, this option and that option, and well, what will that mean for the timing, and when do we need to be available for procedures and interventions and things like that. And I remember I've still got it on my iPad, like a little whiteboard brain dump, and where I was trying to explain to Doug what I had absorbed about the schedule of like, this is how long we'll be doing this and how long we'll be doing that. And I don't know, you know, looking back, none of it really matters, but it does just seem like this big towering monster of scientific mystery.
That's a really good way of putting it. Could you tell me about the acronym? Because there is some Latin there.
There is some Latin. So IVF stands for in vitro fertilisation. Vitro being the Latin word for glass or glass, depending on where in the world you're coming from. So basically, normally fertilisation is a process that happens inside a woman's body between an egg and a sperm. In vitro fertilisation, IVF, is where it happens outside of the body in glass. And literally in a glass Petri dish. And that is literally where it's still happening. And historically, they were called test tube babies. As far as I understand it, test tubes aren't actually involved because it's actually happening on a flat dish where embryologists can look with a microscope at what is happening in the dish. So it would be quite difficult if it was in a test tube and you'd be like searching for the little wrigglers to see what happened.
So it's not just you stick both things in and you just give it a good shake.
I mean, that is closer to the truth than you might imagine, but flat rather than tube.
Fewer spatial dimensions.
Indeed. Yes. Fine. So literally it means that the fertilisation, the egg and the sperm to come together happens outside the body in a scientific glassware, and then the body takes over. So it becomes an embryo, then goes back into the woman's body.
And is that what happened with you? You said frozen embryo transfer.
I think we'll get to it into a bit more detail later. But essentially, that embryo, once it's fertilised inside the Petri dish, you can incubate that embryo and grow it up to a certain stage outside the body. But then it does really need to go into the body to carry on growing. If, for whatever reason, the body's not ready to do that, either because you want to try some embryos and not others, you can actually save those embryos and freeze them until a later date. So IVF is part of a suite of what's called assisted reproductive technologies that are available to individuals and couples who are trying to conceive and who've had difficulty conceiving or know that they're going to have difficulty conceiving because, for example, they might be same-sex couples. So as you start to embark on this journey, you come across a lot more weird acronyms within the assistive reproductive technology, the ART domain.
Oh, there are more
so
acronyms
many,
than I thought.
So many acronyms. Awesome. So you can have, if you want to still try and get the fertilisation to happen inside the body, you can have an IVI or an IUI, which is an intravaginal insemination, or an intrauterine insemination, which is you might, crassly, a turkey baster. You're actually taking sperm, insemination, the sperm part, and putting it in the body actively. And so that's often the case with same-sex couples, with donor sperm. They might not have any fertility issues within themselves, but they just need to get some sperm in there because at current time, there isn't a scalable technology where you can combine the DNA from two eggs. You do still need sperm in the equation. So your IVI is your intravaginal, so it just goes in the outside area. Well, not for the outside, but like the vaginal canal.
It's not like a dip, like you get on a farm.
It's not a wipe.
Yeah.
And then intrauterine is a bit more involved, where it is actually you're trying to get the sperm straight into the uterus. Then the next phase up is your IVF, and we'll talk about what that involves. And then as a subset of IVF, you get ICSI, which is your intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So if you've ever seen a picture of IVF taking place, this is what you're seeing, where the embryologists, they literally take a sperm in a pipette and they stab it into an egg and then squeeze the sperm into the egg. But in the vast majority of IVF cases, that's not the case. That's not what's happening.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's mental. I thought it was.
Yes, most people do, yeah.
Right. So with traditional IVF, that's probably a very clumsy way of putting it, are you just putting them in the glassware?
Yeah.
And waiting for nature to take its course.
Literally wait overnight, yeah. Which is why we don't see pictures of it, because it's not something that's monitored in the same way and photographed in the same way. So, in a sense, our impression of what it involves is governed by what we can see.
So it's less selective for sperm, I guess. So presumably ICSI is that something that you need if you need to be quite selective
With the sperm, exactly.
in terms of like avoiding certain hereditary diseases and stuff like that.
Yeah, or it could just be, and actually we did do ICSI in the end, because after all of our testing, we were officially diagnosed as unexplained infertility because they couldn't find anything specifically wrong with me. However, Doug had a bit of an unpredictable supply. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad. So, to me, that is not unexplained. It's the male component. Like, I was fine. The male component was not fine. Anyway, so the way of dealing with that was saying, you're going to have ICSI instead of IVF. It is IVF still. The ICSI form of IVF, where Doug will give a sample, and they will literally physically sort through for the healthiest looking swimmer within that sample, suck him up, poke him in.
Wow. So, slight scientific tangent. We, interested laymen, will be aware of the idea of the egg almost being selective in terms of the sperm that she allows to go in. I don't know if there's a huge scientific basis for that, but is that something that is still able to happen with the ICSI?
Not with ICSI, no. Because what you're talking about is in a natural environment and also in your standard IVF, the egg is surrounded by hundreds of sperm, which are much, much smaller than the egg, that are all they're knocking at the door. They're all trying to penetrate the wall of the egg at the same time. And what you say is what's poorly understood is what determines which one is going to get through. And it might be a compatibility thing. It could be some kind of agency. I mean, we're attributing way too much agency to a single cell, but we don't understand that. But whatever happens, whenever that selected sperm is allowed through the outer membrane, out of the casings of the egg, a chemical reaction happens that locks the door to all the others. So obviously with ICSI, it's a completely different situation because there's not hundreds of sperm knocking at the door. You've just got your egg held in place and you've got your needle that just punches a single sperm in. Now that those doors do get locked, but that egg had no agency, no chemical agency in what sperm was going to be injected. And the results that we see of whether it's going to be compatible or not manifest in whether that embryo survives or not. So I don't know enough about the success rates overall for individual embryos taking, and then when we talk about the process we'll talk about it a bit more, but I'm sure there's a whole load of science of selective embryology in there that I'm not qualified to talk about.
No, and I suspect we're butting up against the boundary of scientific understanding anyway of what happens during that moment. And of course, I mean, I imagine there are a few potential issues that are swept away by that process of it selecting the fittest looking sperm, that sort of thing. So there is some degree of genetic fitness that's inferred in that process. Anyway, very interesting. That potentially is getting us off track, sorry, but I found that very interesting.
So those are kind of your acronyms. Your IVF, your ICSI, your IUI, your IVI. If you are on the conveyor belt of medical intervention where you're going to go through some of these processes, there are additional things that can be applicable to you. If you have poor sperm supply or poor egg reserve, you have the option to have donated eggs or sperm. If what is standing in the way of your fertility is something to do with the uterus and ovaries, if it's PCOS, That's polycystic ovarian syndrome, where the ovaries are producing too many follicles, and that can really get in the way of fertility. Or if you have got endometriosis or quite irregular periods, all of those sorts of things. There's different cycles, there's different doses of medication, different lengths of medication that you can have to deal with your individual situation. I mean, I can only really speak from experience from my situation, but I was aware getting into it that, if it was a menstrual problem, if it was a uterine problem, there would be a different course of medication preceding the standard IVF procedure.
Wow. So I'm inferring from that when you, kind of embark on, jump onto the conveyor, to use your metaphor, and we'll get into kind of who does that and how in a sec, but basically there's some initial testing involved that kind of sets, what forks in the road you can investigate.
So much testing. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes, so much testing, yeah. And again, if you are somebody that has suffered with infertility for a very long time, if you, for example, you have many miscarriages, you might get investigations into the causes of those miscarriages, and that could again send you down, like you say, a different fork of the road to more testing or different medication and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Goodness me.
Yeah.
It's a minefield.
It is a minefield.
And so if someone is worried about their fertility or they know that they're going to struggle to conceive, who's eligible for this? What do they need to make sure of first before they talk to someone?
So sadly, in this world, if you've got enough money, you can get exactly what you want. And so, if money is no object and you have your private doctor on call, feel free, just do that call up and say, hey, I'm sick of having sex with my husband. Let's try a different way. That's not usually how it happens, but
guaranteed that conversation has been had.
But thankfully in the UK, there's a nationwide kind of funding programme where a certain number of cycles of IVF, rounds of IVF, goes at IVF are available for free, providing you meet certain criteria. You could be from any background, you could be a single woman, you could be a same-sex couple, or you could be what are they called? Mixed-sex, a heterosexual couple who has failed to conceive over a period of time. So in terms of individuals who are trying, it doesn't matter, but you do need to meet certain medical criteria to access these free rounds of IVF, which is basically, that classic medical trade-off between the likelihood of success and, how much they're willing to invest in you. So when I was doing my IVF, I'm pretty sure that you had to be under 36. But in researching for this and just double checking all my facts, apparently now it's 42.
Oh.
So you can access IVF on the NHS up to the age of 42, which is fantastic, I think, but also reflective of a growing trend of women getting pregnant later on in life, I think.
Yeah. Oh, because the age for kind of the geriatric pregnancy keeps creeping up as well as it becomes more and more normal to be pregnant later on in life.
Yeah, my mum was classed as a geriatric pregnant person at age 30.
Yeah. My mum was the same, and she was 29, I think.
She was quite wounded by that, I think.
Yeah.
Quite scarred.
Not fair. Oh my God.
But yes, again, because that trade-off between the likelihood of success, how many resources the NHS basically wants to put into you, it does slightly vary based on what region you're in. But if you're under 39, typically you can get 3 rounds of IVF on the NHS. And if you're over 40, between 40 and 42, you can typically get 1 round of IVF on the NHS. You have to have a certain healthy BMI, which was an issue for me because I've always been on the larger side, and I've been fit and healthy, but my BMI was actually quite high. So in order to get out IVF, I had to lose weight, which I did. But so you have to have a BMI between 19 and 30. So you can't be too skinny either. And critically, you have to have a demonstrated period of infertility. So you can't just go, oh, well, I'd quite like a baby, but I don't really fancy
doing your time in the trenches.
Exactly. So for heterosexual couples, that means trying for 2 years without conceiving successfully. And same-sex couples are required to go through some artificial insemination before they can access IVF on the NHS. Now, this is where it gets a bit criminal. It is slightly changing now, but, if you meet all the criteria and you're a heterosexual couple, just go for your IVF. But for same-sex couples, you have to go through IVI or IUI, but that's not available on the NHS, or it wasn't.
Oh, so there's almost a paywall.
There's a paywall to being gay, basically.
Oh, wow, that's ridiculous.
Or single. So I think they are changing it now so that they're basically offering a certain number of cycles of IUI, I think, on the NHS. And I could be wrong. And things change all the time. So if you're listening to this at some point in the future, do check our stats on that. But yeah, there has always been sort of a form of paywall because you have to go through this artificial insemination, which you have to pay for before you can access the free IVF.
Just to play devil's advocate on that, is there an implicit assumption there potentially that if a same-sex couple is trying without success to conceive, there is more likely to be a problem that would require IVF to solve, whereas with the same-sex couples, the less invasive options are more likely to work?
I mean,
am I being far too generous?
I don't know. I don't know the decisions. Obviously, you've got to try. You've got to try and make some effort. And each, artificial insemination is way cheaper to do than IVF is to do. And so you've got to try somehow. I just feel like you've got to go through 12 rounds of artificial insemination before IVF is accessible, of which 6 of that has to be intrauterine, which is an involved process, So
yeah, whatever the shades of grey, there's clearly not parity there yet, is there?
There is not. No.
Okay, good to know that's changing though.
Yeah, it is changing. So yeah, definitely worth checking whenever you're listening to this. But yeah, just to get back to it, if you are paying, and there is lots of reasons why you might have to pay. If, for example, you start a new relationship with a partner who has already got children. So, if you, as a woman, meet a man who's already got children, you're ineligible for IVF.
What, completely?
Yes.
Ooh, not sure how I feel about that.
Yeah, a friend of mine, that happened to her. They had to pay for their IVF. They were never eligible because he'd already got children.
Oh, right. Okay, that's interesting because I can obviously understand the distinction if you have already had your own children. But, yeah.
But of course, yeah, if you are paying privately, there isn't a maximum age, although, any medical professional worth their salt will say you're getting to an age, if you've gone through the menopause, it's not going to happen. But essentially, some places will consider IVF up to the age of 55 or something like that.
Obviously, this kind of butts up against the question of egg quality, which we've talked about before. Obviously, we females are subject to the effects of time, and our eggs over time not being replenished, they will degrade. And so, I saw a note that if you're actually considering donor eggs, you may well have more time because you can kind of sidestep that issue. Your body is potentially as able as it's ever been to carry a pregnancy. It's just the quality of your eggs that might stop you getting pregnant. So if you're getting donor eggs, it's fair to say that IVF could have more chances of success with a donor egg.
Yeah, so much to consider when you're going into this, and it's one of these things, it depends so much on your personal situation, and you don't know that personal situation. Your average couple going into let's have a baby, we naively, me and Doug, we got married, I had my contraception taken out, let's start trying to have a baby, and you don't know what's going on inside your body. You might not necessarily know that you've got any issues, and sort of navigating even the referral is quite a daunting prospect.
Yeah. Because I know a lot of, your normal couple out there who, don't have $1,000 million to spend on multiple IVF rounds. They are, I would imagine, listening to this thinking, where the hell do I start? I know I'm eligible. We've been trying for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So where do they go? Who do they ring? Who did you guys call?
Well, the first hurdle is to get an appointment with your GP.
Oh, well, that's it then.
Yeah, that's done.
There's no point.
The end.
Come on.
Yeah, okay, bye. As with all of these things, the starting point is with the GP, because they're the ones that can make the referrals to the right people and trigger some of the initial testing that will start to decide which specific route you go down. And so from that, the GP will typically refer you to a fertility consultant within your local hospital, typically. And this is all still within the NHS. And so we went to our local hospital multiple times for not just the testing, but the consultation and the check-in on how things had been going. And then once you are kind of, if you like, green-lit for a course of IVF, then you're going to be referred to an IVF clinic. And so there are licensed IVF clinics run by the HFEA, which is the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. So they're sort of off-fert.
You're such a dork.
I am a massive dork.
Off-fert.
They're the people. They are responsible for making sure that all of the rules are followed when it comes to fertility treatments, because there are a lot of rules. There's a lot of ethical rules. There's a lot of medical rules, and so any clinic that's actually physically doing this process has to abide by those rules. Make sure that they're not doing anything, that violates human rights or anything like that. And so your treatment will take place at a licensed HFEA clinic.
Oh, and is that where you guys went then?
Yeah. Yes, it was licensed. I wouldn't say it was glamorous. It was actually on an industrial estate between a Volvo sales garage and a pallet warehouse. I'm kidding you not. Every time we would drive around this estate and I'm like, oh my God. And it just looked like, your standard out of the box industrial estate building, and then you walk in and it's this beautiful, shiny, super clean medical clinic. But gosh, it was a bizarre experience.
And so literally, in terms of the miracle of life, Felix began on this planet next to a Volvo dealership.
But next to a Volvo dealership, yeah.
Fabulous. I love that. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall of your car as you and Doug rolled up for the first time, thinking, what the hell is this?
Yeah, following the sat nav of like, are you serious? Is it going to get better? It didn't get better. But it doesn't matter where it is situated or what's on the outside, as long as they meet the regulations and, they meet your satisfaction for cleanliness and bedside manner. So the actual treatment will then take place in a clinic. And then some of the follow-up takes place in the clinic, but then you pretty much, as soon as you're pregnant, you're back into the standard NHS hospital, doctors, midwives.
Oh, yeah, then you're kind of discharged from fertility treatment.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so where did it start then? What happens first?
Before you get anywhere near the clinic will only take you once you're going to start taking the drugs and be poked and prodded for the actual procedure. But to determine what's wrong with you, potentially, what kind of treatment you might need, and to basically make sure you really, truly are infertile and you haven't been lying about trying, you have to go through a whole load of testing. And it is so heavily weighted towards the woman. Given that it does physically take two people to make a baby, the vast majority of testing takes place on the woman. And I mentioned this before, there are a million ways that your fertility can be diagnosed within the female sphere. But if it's the man, well, it could be male infertility or it could be unexplained infertility, and that's it. So some of the testing that I went through, I had so much blood drawn. So they take your blood and they check for things like your hormone levels. So you'll have blood tests at specific times in your menstrual cycles to make sure that your hormone levels are cycling and doing what they should do to regulate a normal menstrual cycle. That blood test can also be used to check something called your ovarian reserve, which is literally an indication of how many eggs you've got in your ovaries, which is obviously, an important thing, because if you haven't got any, or if they're all, shriveled away, then there's not much point in doing IVF. So loads and loads of blood tests. They do internal ultrasounds to physically look at the state of your ovaries and your uterus and your fallopian tubes and try and make sure that everything is kind of working as it should be, and, everything links together as it should do. That internal ultrasound is literally like a dildo ultrasound wand that goes inside you.
Yeah. It's not the nicest thing in the entire world.
I mean, it's not awful. If you've ever used a sex toy or you've had sex, it's no different, except for the fact that obviously you're in a clinical setting. It's weird.
We went through this process as well, so I've had quite a few internals, and one of my ovaries is really hard to see for some reason because of the way my guts are.
Yep.
So that I always found that really painful on one side, because they have to well, I don't want to do that. Let's not put that in.
It's in. I mean, it really differs. Within the hospital, I had some very rough ultrasound techs. Okay. And, I'm not going down the route of abuse or trauma or anything, but you've just been like, oh, that really is uncomfortable. That has pinched. Sometimes you have to have a full bladder. Sometimes you have to have an empty bladder. I always had way too much gas in my bowels. And so she's like pressing, and I'm like, I am going to fart in your face. I'm really sorry. I didn't. I never did. But, you know, these are sensations that you have when you have an internal, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, you like a smear test, which you also have to have an up-to-date smear test. You just, one of those things you kind of have to grin and bear it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, because of the way we are. It's all inside.
Side note, because our testing had taken so long and COVID happened in the middle, we got approved for our IVF. I had my schedule to actually start the medication and start the cycle. And then they suddenly rang me up and said, oh gosh, your smear test's out of date. You need a smear test. And so I had to go up to Harley Street and get a private smear test in order for me to be able to actually start on the scheduled date that we'd all figured out.
Oh, someone's doing well. Smear test on Harley Street.
Well, it was throw money at the situation or completely like put it back for an undisclosed. Like I had work. Like I was flying to America. I had to, like, it was then or no time. But I don't know if you know, but smear tests can sometimes come back inconclusive.
Yeah.
And so I lay there on Harley Street with this doctor, and I said, I need this smear test to work. Like, I need it to take, and I don't want an inconclusive result. She's like, I'll do it 10 times. As in, because like a smear test, they literally take a swab from your cervix. Oh my God, it was like she'd taken a, like, loofah.
Ooh,
yeah, it was really not pleasant. But I was like, grin and bear it, grin and bear it, grin and bear
yeah.
it.
Take all the cells, all of them. Take the entire cervix.
Yeah, just please.
And look at it.
Look at it. I don't want any inconclusive because this has to happen now.
Oh, mate, you are brave.
Yeah, actually, I think that is one of the things that has still stuck with me, that really unpleasant experience. But, you know, you have to get it done. You have to have all your STI tests. And then, depending on what they find, there can be other tests. You can have a laparoscopy. Laparoscopy?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Laparoscopy?
Like where it goes up into your tubes to have a closer look, or even x-rays and things like that. So there is a whole suite of kind of gynecological testing that you have to have done to try and diagnose what is causing the infertility. Whereas for the man, he can just jizz in a cup and they'll look at it.
Yep. Excellent.
Now, I don't want to be dismissive of that, because it is the least conducive to ejaculation environment in the world.
I was going to say, having been through this part of the process, I can say that Jake found that as traumatising as anything I went through.
I think that's given him a little bit too much credit, but it was, yes, it is unpleasant. You know, a clinical sticky room with some sexy magazines in an envelope, or a DVD, which somebody had stolen in Doug's testing room.
Oh, fair play.
Yeah, I can't imagine it. It's so unpleasant.
No, absolutely.
And so once the man has produced that sample, it's examined under the microscope for the quality of that sperm, which means, you know, are they a good shape? Do they swim well? Are there lots of them? So it's, you know, it's as detailed examination. It's just, unfortunately, it doesn't impact on their kind of long-term psyche quite as badly as us, I feel, anyway. And yeah, if there are issues with that, they can go down the route of further exploration, sort of testicular scans and fiddling.
That's nice. That action's definitely going in.
Yep. So all that testing, that takes place within a normal hospital setting.
So you're at the consultation stage, you've got a fertility consultant, they're trying to figure out if IVF is the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Got you.
And then once they decide that it is, then off you go to the clinic. And the clinic will take all of those notes and they'll look at that, and they will then decide the best menu items for you as you go into the treatment. So the treatment. Essentially, the treatment involves the woman taking medication to stimulate the production of loads of eggs, and then those eggs being harvested and gone into the fertilisation process. Like I said before, that medication cycle can look different depending on, you know, your individual menstrual situation. So quite a common cause of infertility for women are ovarian and uterine problems that might necessitate what's called a downregulation. So it's a 2 to 3 weeks of medication that just kind of squashes your normal cycles and just like sort of resets it and gives you a baseline. Because if you're somebody who's like, periods are all over the place, or you've got eggs flying out all over the place, then they want to start from a kind of level playing field, a baseline. And so down regulation is quite a common precursor to the IVF round, where you actually just go, okay, let's flatten this out, flatten out all of your hormones, and then the medication takes control.
Got you.
I didn't need that because, as I mentioned before, it was dog swimmers that were presumed to be the issue. And so we just went straight in with the ovarian stimulation. And what that is an injection of what's called follicle stimulating hormone, which literally stimulates the follicles in your ovaries to produce eggs.
And that's a natural hormone, isn't it?
It is a natural hormone, yeah. So it's something that is naturally produced within your body, and either through injecting it for a longer period than it would normally be in your body, or at a higher dose. I'm not 100% sure how that works. By doing that under a controlled medical setting, you get more eggs. You get more follicles developing within the ovaries, which are ultimately going to produce more eggs. And so that takes place over about 10 or 14 days. So that's daily injections of this follicle stimulating hormone into your tummy or your thighs, and then a few scans as you're going along to check how it's working, how those follicles are developing.
I see. So you have to have your ovaries scanned to check that it's not having an impact.
Yeah, but also to check that it's working as well.
Right.
So that's an internal ultrasound. And I'm forever stuck with the image of what my ovaries look like towards the end of that process. And you can feel it, like you do feel kind of a bit swollen.
Oh my goodness.
Because the ovaries are swelling, because each follicle is actually expanding with fluid inside it. So you can feel that kind of, you're full of two things. And it looked like loofahs. It looked like, the loofahs that you have in the shower with the big holes in them.
Yeah.
The ovaries look like that. And it's or like a lotus root. Huge holes inside this tissue. It was incredible.
Oh, that must be so weird to think that's going on inside you, and you can actually see the result.
It was quite nice actually, because you could actually this is how I feel, and I can see why, because look at this massive pile of stuff inside me.
When we were doing our fertility testing to see if we could get pregnant, I was given a run of a similar kind of stimulating hormone. It was taken orally. I was told, kind of in layman's terms, it was just a very slow dose of what you would receive when you begin IVF. Right. But the consultant told us that if you do get pregnant naturally as a result of this kind of ovary stimulation, you've got a greater chance of having twins. Yes. Because it can make as you say, it makes your ovaries kind of release more eggs than it otherwise would have done.
Yeah, that's right. Because normally the natural follicle stimulating hormone in your body will cause 1 or 2 follicles to mature, but with the medically supervised increase of that, you can have many, many more, as we saw, and each of those follicles contains an egg, some eggs, and essentially, that's how multiples can come about as a result of that.
Wowzers.
But of course, if you're doing IVF, it's never going to get to that point, because again, just like the production of the follicles is sort of medically induced, the removal of those eggs is a medical process as well. So after you've been through 10 or 14 days of those injections, it'll all be scheduled perfectly, but 36 hours before you have an appointment at the clinic, you take what's called a trigger injection, and that will send a message to your ovaries to say, okay, we've got to all of these eggs need to mature, and it's just getting the follicles to go through a process where they're ready to, the eggs inside are mature. Essentially, they are at a stage, the similar stage as they would be to be released. If you do the trigger injection too early, then there's a chance those eggs could be released. And if you do it too late, those eggs won't be mature enough to be fertilised in vitro. So the timing is really crucial in that situation.
And, this is where we start to touch on the stress of going through this. There's not only the medical changes going on in your body, there's the stress of, oh my God, the stakes are so high, it needs to go perfectly, this is so complicated.
Yeah, I mean, so many alarms set on my phone for when the injections had to happen, and traffic getting to the Volvo garage, getting to the clinic, silly things like that. Yeah, there is just low levels of stress constantly, which of course is not conducive to feeling feeling on top of your fertility game at the best of times, but
No, famously falling pregnant whilst highly stressed. Really easy.
yeah. Luckily, it's happening outside your body, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So you take your trigger injection. You don't really feel anything beyond, the stabbing. There's no like major fireworks inside your body, but those eggs are maturing. 36 hours later, you go into the clinic and you go for your egg collection procedure. So this is a proper medical procedure. This is probably the most major medical procedure that you go through with IVF because it happens under sedation. So they hook you up to all the beeps and the monitors and the beepers and all of that sort of stuff. You're in a surgical gown and they put you under sedation, which is a cold liquid that goes into the back of your hand through a cannula. And sedation, I'd never had sedation before. Have you ever had sedation?
No.
No, they say it just makes you not care. So it doesn't make you unconscious, but it makes you kind of insensate in the technical term. It basically makes you not aware and give you no memory of what is going on.
Oh, so you don't remember it?
No.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it was as if I was unconscious. And I think some people are conscious and lucid and some people are sleepy. But yeah, it was as if I just blinked and that 20 minutes of my life was gone.
Wow.
So strange.
That's crazy. But obviously at the time, not that you'd remember it, you were not bothered. It was like you'd had a double hit of Valium.
Pretty much. And so, yeah, you have the sedation and they go in through your vagina, in through your cervix, but then it's a long, thin needle that actually then comes out the side of your uterus and into the ovaries. And sort of geometrically, that's the quickest route to the ovaries rather than going up through and round the fallopian tubes.
Oh, so do they puncture your uterus?
Yes, but it's like such a fine needle. I mean, obviously you have to sign away all of these risks of like potential complications and bleeding, but they're very, very rare. But yeah, they puncture the side of your uterus to get to the ovaries, and then they puncture the ovaries and suck out all of the eggs from the follicles. And, obviously they've got ultrasound on you, external ultrasound, to see what's going on at that time.
Whoa, I didn't know. I'd always been confused about the geometry of egg collection, and that makes a lot of sense.
It does. It's not nice to think about. But yeah, but you're sedated, you don't care. There's no memory of it whatsoever. And then at that same time, whilst you are undergoing a potentially risky medical procedure, your partner is expected to produce a sample.
What, at the same time? What, there stood next to you? Like, what? I need to know more about this.
I don't know. We can't actually remember. Doug has blanked it out. But on that same day, at the same times that the eggs come out of your body, fresh sperm need to be available. So whether it's shortly after or shortly before or during the process, we can't remember. We genuinely can't remember. I was like, were you distracted because I was unconscious? Were you distracted because you were worried about what I was about to go through? Or were you distracted because you were worried that I could be bleeding internally? I don't know.
Wow.
I know.
Okay. Okay, good. I was about to get very angry because I was like, is it only at this point when you are under anaesthetic that they think to test the man? But this is for the actual sperm that will become your child.
This is the actual fertilisation part. So they do have to produce at least twice throughout the process. Very traumatic. Again, in the sticky waiting room. Not in the waiting room. Not in the waiting room. In the sticky production room.
That's what they kept yelling to Doug anyway. Not in the waiting room!
There is, in this little room that you go in to supply, there is like a little hatch. So you're supposed to write your name on the label and then just like put your sample in the hatch. We always joked that he just opened the hatch and went free range.
Just all over the inside. Good luck!
Good luck!
That's why everything's covered in plastic.
Yes,
wipe people clean. Like Doug.
Wipe clean. I'm sorry, Doug, if you ever listen to this.
It is one of the funniest memories is my own husband texting me when he was going in for his testing appointment, and he literally just texted saying everything's covered in plastic. And that was it.
Lovely.
He was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Oh, it's horrible, isn't it? Oh god. So you're sedated for the egg collection. You don't know what's going on. It all goes smoothly. You're wheeled back into your recovery room, and then you're left to recover for 1 or 2 hours with a cup of tea and a biscuit. You come round. At that point, I had a little scary moment because I essentially fainted, but it was a specific adrenaline reaction to I think me just kind of being okay and like something happened. But of course, I was still wired up to all the beepers and the wires. And so Doug's sitting next to me and he's like, oh, yeah, it's gone so well. And then suddenly I hit the deck. I'm only lying down, but like, and all of the machines go absolutely crazy. And so at that point, he's just like, she's dead.
She's dead. That's it.
But literally, it was just a feint and my blood pressure dropped, and that was all it was. And they sort of sat me up and gave me some water, and it was all good. But, you know, little things like that can really stick with you, stick with your memory.
100%, because you don't imagine, you know, as we've talked about it before, you know, you think of fertility treatment as being, you know, very kind of non-invasive. Oh, we're just going to, you know, get pregnant. Or, you know, you think of it like a C-section is, oh, it's just your baby coming. But it's until you're actually in that situation that you think, this is really scary. Mm-hmm. And very invasive and very medicalised. And very
invasive. Very, very invasive and medicalised. I mean, shouldn't really be surprising that this medical procedure is medicalised, but
indeed,
there's a lot to it, yeah. And so when you come round, they'll tell you how many eggs they've managed to collect and how many were mature. And again, that sort of depends on the precise minute of the timing of your trigger injection and appointment. So, yeah, you can't blame yourself because your body does all kinds of things. But, yeah, you know, at that point, you can be very disappointed to find that the last 2 weeks of stabbing yourself has only resulted in a smaller than expected number of mature eggs.
Yeah, because this is the point, you know, anecdotally I've heard from a lot of people who've been through this process for many reasons, is this is the point where you start to have the fixation on those numbers as well. It's the right, how many eggs have we got? Yeah. And then, of course, the
survival rate as you go through.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what happens once you go home, you drive out past the pallet warehouse, you know, you go and have a stiff drink, and yeah, you're sore, basically. You're a little bit sore after the recovery, but that's kind of 24 hours and then you're sorted. But so the embryologists take the mature eggs that you've collected. I had 8 eggs in total, of which 7 were mature, which is not as great as we hoped, but not bad at all. And then, as I say, we went through ICSI because Doug's swimmers were a bit unpredictable, so they will have picked out the best ones and injected them individually into each of those 7 mature eggs.
Right, so they would have looked at the Petri. Obviously, first they would have wiped down the inside of the hatch and wrung it out into the Petri dish.
Oh God, can you imagine?
Right. And then
they'd have looked through a microscope, picked out the individual sperm, the good-looking ones, the A-grade swimmers, and then fertilised the 7 eggs with that.
And so that's all happening the same day, isn't it?
That's straight away, yeah, literally, straight afterwards. There is a huge team of embryologists and staff behind the scenes, all shuffling around in their white Crocs. So there's a lot of action happening, and it is just a process, and it is so time dependent. So they either mix the eggs and the sperm for your normal IVF case, and then put it in an incubator, which replicates the temperature and humidity of the inside of human body, or they do this individual injection process depending on the process. And then they leave it. Then they go home.
Wow.
Turn off the lights and they go home, and it's incubated overnight, and then the next day they will come back and they will see how many have fertilised, because there's no way of knowing at that moment whether the nuclei have fused and whether that fertilisation has been successful. All you can do is like push them together.
Yeah, and then you hope that all the DNA knows what to do, but
exactly.
You can't really make it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are not at the point of fertilisation yet. It's when they come in the next morning.
Yeah, and they will look at how many embryos have started to divide. Basically, you start with an egg. Once it's fertilised, it will then it will split in half to make 2, and then it will split again to make 4, and then in the nature of exponential increase, a few days later, you'll have hundreds of cells. So the next day, they'll come back, and they'll look at their Petri dish, and they'll say, okay, these ones are still 1 cell. They shouldn't still be 1 cell if they were fertilised, so they're in the bin. And the ones that are more than 1 cell are the fertilised ones. And those are the ones that they keep nurturing through the next few days.
And is this the famous, obviously anyone who's interested in fertility treatment and is all over social media will be familiar with the day 2 blastocyst.
Yeah.
Being an important thing. And is this at the point where we're at the day 2?
Yes, this is the day 2, yeah.
Right, so this is like, that's started dividing, so that's doing a thing it should be doing. Mm-hmm. That hasn't.
Yep.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly how it works, like the communication, but you'll have an appointment for typically 5 days after your egg collection for an embryo transfer, where they will transfer one or several embryos that have survived into your body. So I know that there are certain situations where that embryo transfer can take place earlier, where you have that day 2 blastocyst or that day 3 blastocyst. But typically, in order to get the best chance of that embryo surviving once it's in the mother, you want to make sure it's a healthy embryo before it goes in. And so what they do is they wait until day 5, where they can see that's at the point where you've got hundreds of cells in an embryo, and the cells that are going to become the baby have started to separate from the cells that are going to become the placenta. And so by day 5, they can look at those hundreds of cells and they grade them, basically. They say, well, you look really good. You're looking a bit lopsided and a bit smaller than you should be. And they will, out of all of the ones that have fertilised and survived up to day 5, they'll basically grade them and decide which to transfer, what to do with them, and where you go from there.
Right. And is that done visually? So they are saying this thing should be a certain, ideally should be a certain shape, certain size by this point in time. Mm-hmm. How close are we to that?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So obviously you've got how many have actually fertilised in the first place, and then how many survive to a good enough quality that they are worth trying to put back into the mother. Because this is kind of a window into all of the things that can go wrong in a natural conception and a natural fertilisation. Because it could be that, a slightly wonky sperm or a slightly wonky egg combined, and even though fertilisation happened, the blastocyst didn't develop properly and the placental cells never developed properly, which meant that embryo was never going to be a goer, which is why, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss.
Exactly. So this is a really, really important reminder, is this process is going on if you have a pregnancy that doesn't require IVF, this is still going on inside you. You just have the privilege of very rarely being aware of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what really strikes me is that when you're undergoing the IVF process, you are so fixated on that, and you are literally, someone is literally watching it happen. Mm-hmm. The wonkiness or the non-wonkiness, and that is so stressful. It's
so stressful. I mean, it must be amazing to think that it's a day job for these people, and I'd love to talk to an embryologist about what that looks like and how they feel about it day in, day out.
Contact us if you'd like to talk to us.
Yes, any embryologists out there, please get in touch. But that is the point of the IVF. This is why IVF happens. This is why you've gone through all this medication and the testing and the intervention, is for somebody to literally be there at that moment and go, you look like you're a goer, rather than just gambling on whatever your body throws out.
Yeah.
So you've got your day 5 blastocyst. So remember, we had 7 mature eggs, of which only 4 successfully fertilised.
Okay.
Which is quite standard.
Cool. So the next day, so on day 2, someone comes in and they see that 4 of your...
what had been eggs have now started dividing. Exactly.
Great.
So they bin the other 3, and then they keep watching those 4. And then by day 5, we actually only had 2 quality survivors. I don't actually know what that means for the other 2. Maybe they'd stopped dividing. Maybe they'd gone completely mutant. But the embryologist decided that those were not good enough quality to try to put back into my body. Now, IVF is often associated with twins, multiples. And one of the reasons of that is because traditionally and historically, to maximise the chances of these perfect embryos that we've now created actually taking within the body, they would just put them all back in the mother.
Right.
And so if you're putting 2 embryos in the mother, there's a good chance that 2 embryos are going to continue growing and you're going to end up with 2 babies. You're going to get twins. That has changed now, especially for mothers who still have IVF rounds ahead of them. They're not too old, younger mothers or mothers with lesser fertility problems. They have the option to only transfer 1, and they're advised to only transfer 1 of those embryos. And the other one can be preserved ad infinitum, apparently, by freezing, by cryogenic freezing.
I see. So this is more of an effort to kind of balance risks. So obviously a multiples pregnancy is higher risk than a single pregnancy.
Exactly.
So there's hedge betting on both sides, basically.
Exactly, yeah. So if you know that this is your last ditch attempt, then you might say, you've got no rounds of IVF left, you've depleted your ovarian reserve, you can't afford any more donor eggs, you've got 2 good quality embryos, then you might choose to have both of those embryos retransferred.
We're literally going to take all the eggs, put them into this one basket.
Exactly, literally.
Quite literally.
Whereas Somebody like me, I was 35. I didn't have any uterine problems. I still had a long fertility journey ahead of me if this didn't work. They were like, yeah, we'll just try one because it would be much safer.
Fine. Okay.
So out of the 2 that survived to that 5 days, they were graded. They graded on size from 1 to 6. 1 being small, 6 being large and like literally beginning to, they say, hatch out of an outer casing. Both of mine were rated 5 on that scale. So that was really good size-wise. And then they rated on how well the baby bundle of cells is growing and how well the placenta bundle of cells is growing. And so you get a letter from A to D, I think. Obviously, A grade being the best, D grade being the worst. And as long as they're above the C grade, they're good for transfer. You'll be told, you've got a 5DD embryo or a 5BB embryo.
Wow.
And so the embryologist will make the decision to transfer probably the best graded embryo because that's your best bet. And so we had our 5AA embryo retransferred at that point.
Wow, you had a 5AA?
I had a 5AA.
Well done you.
Well, it's not a 6AA, is it?
Oh, yeah.
Overachiever over here. Where did that 1% go?
Does that mean that Felix is just a little bit shorter than ideal? He's got a couple of centimetres.
No, because that transfer didn't work for us.
Whoa! Okay, plot twist.
Plot twist, pew! So the transfer is, in a way, it's less invasive. It's less of a medical procedure than the egg collection. But because you're totally compos mentis, it is so weird. Because you're literally in the room with the Petri dishes, on a thing with the stirrups. The head embryologist is there, and he opens your legs up on the stirrups, turns on a floodlight shining at your business end. Speculum, open up. I mean, good God, if you had any propriety before, abandon all hope ye who enter here. So he's standing there. We've got a nurse on the ultrasound looking at my uterus, and then he's on the syringe. And so they come in, literally from the incubator, shuffle in their little white Crocs, check the names line up, really important to make sure you've got the right names. The embryo goes into the syringe, and they visually confirm embryo is in the tube, and they can see it like that.
Wow.
And then as we're watching it on the screen, on the ultrasound screen, the embryologist squirts it in, and we actually have a photo of the moment of it arriving. Like it's like a tiny little ejaculation directly into my uterus.
Wow.
And then they pull out the syringe and they confirm no embryo in the tube, so they know that it's gone in, and that's it.
And then it's up to your body.
And then it's up to your body.
It's up to that embryo, and your body then just have to have a chat.
Yeah.
And it's up to them.
It's up to them. So
right.
From that moment, you walk out, and it's as if you've just had sex, basically.
Yeah.
You've got your classic 2-week wait and a pregnancy test 2 weeks later to see if it's taken, if it's embedded within the uterus wall, and it's started to produce all the hormones that are indicative of a pregnancy. So that's it.
Wow.
So after a transfer happens, the medication does continue in the form of pessaries, which, like suppositories, go into the bottom end, but actually in the business end of your reproductive system. And so, yeah, you're basically injecting this tablet with a long doodah
in your hoo-ha.
Into your hoo-ha, yeah. And it's full of progesterone, which is a common pregnancy hormone, and it just helps the womb to become nice and cozy and like be an encouraging place for an embryo to develop.
Because I think for some women it is true, isn't it, that is the only thing, they're able to get pregnant, but it's just that kind of critical sort of 2 or 3 weeks, they that the progesterone may not be quite at the right level, so things don't take in those initial days or weeks.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So that can sometimes be the only issue.
It can be, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
So we found the progesterone to be very unpleasant because you're basically putting a substance up there which just kind of stays there, and it makes for quite an unpleasant sensation, moisture, humidity. Not very nice.
Yeah, it's really grim.
Yeah, really grim. But again, just got to grin and bear it.
Yeah, because we did the pessaries as well, actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful.
It's so grim.
So for us, that was our 5AA embryo. That all took place. And 2 weeks later, I took a pregnancy test and it was negative.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It was a whole thing. But we knew we had 3 rounds of IVF on the NHS still available to us. So, we had that. I can't imagine what it would be like to go through that knowing it was going to cost you another X amount of money. So couple of weeks later, we go back and talk to the consultant, and she's like, well, we don't know what went wrong, but do you want to go again? You can have another cycle. And I was like, well, I had another embryo. And she's like, yeah, but don't, that's frozen. You can keep that. I was like, well, what do I want to keep it for? And actually, I'm an only child. I only really wanted one child. I've loved being an only child. And I feel like we were quite rare in saying, well, let's not go through all of that medication and the cycling and the collection again. Let's just go with what we've got already. And the second embryo was a 5BB. So not bad by any means. Not as good as the AA, but I was like, well, and also very importantly, I had a shoot to go to.
Yeah. This is where our careers intersect with parenthood.
And I don't know, I still don't want to know what to think of myself, but I was like, I'm very busy and important. In a month's time, I have to fly to Canada, so I don't have time for all of this.
No.
So they'd frozen the 5BB, literally put it in liquid nitrogen. I don't know, there's probably some sort of process involved in that. But you schedule a frozen transfer.
And how does that differ from the fresh transfer?
So when you have a frozen transfer, your embryo is just defrosted on the day of your transfer. So your transfer is booked for a particular day that lines up with your cycle. And that day they pull it out the freezer and they defrost it. Now, there's a 1 in 5 chance that the embryo won't survive the defrosting process, the thawing process.
Wow, that's scary, actually.
It is scary, and that was a big stress, because obviously you're just taking it into the hands of chance that, you're going to turn up and they're going to tell you, nope, you haven't got an embryo today. But thankfully, that was not the case for us. Our 5BB embryo was transferred. We took the progesterone pessaries again for a couple of weeks. I flew to Canada. And tragically, I was thousands of miles away from my husband when I found out that round had worked.
Wow. Where were you? Were you in a characteristically disgusting hotel room, as we normally
I was
have
in a
on
motel room, in the dark. It was 5 a.m. because I was about to get a helicopter up a volcano.
So you went in a helicopter over a volcano, having just found out you were with child?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, yes, against the odds, something, science baby is a little froyo. He was a frozen embryo. He wasn't the best graded one. He wasn't our first choice. If you ever, wasn't the embryologist's first choice.
As you constantly tell him.
Gosh, that's going to give him a complex, isn't it? Yeah. So, amazingly, that worked. And if it hadn't have worked, we could have gone again. But I'm very grateful for the fact that we managed to achieve it with the minimum amount of IVF fuss, because it is intrusive and it is a big medicalised process. And I have to have mad respect for anybody who just goes through it, just keeps on going through it.
Mental. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a fantastic... I mean, this isn't the end of the story in terms of our coverage of IVF, but in terms of the story of how Felix came into being, a really wonderful ending. Because it gave you a little tiny child
who is now a really large child. Massive with really pointy toes.
Oh, that'll be the BB. Wouldn't have been the AA, would it?
No, it wouldn't have been the AA. AA would have been perfect.
Felix, I love you. I'm sorry, we do.
You are perfect in every way. And that is amazing though, because Felix, touch all the wood, has nothing wrong with him. He hasn't had any issues. He's got a bit of eczema, but the fact that he was rated a BB has made no difference whatsoever to his development.
No, and it is part of the variability and the uncertainty and the chaos of those early days of embryo development.
Exactly.
So many things have to go right, but within that, there's a lot of variability, and I know that I know from my research into this process that as the blastocyst is developing, sometimes you'll have one that's behind, but then it will catch up in terms of the number of cells.
Exactly.
Or, it's...
So that grading system, you can't read too much into it because it is subjective. You literally from just looking down a microscope from an individual embryologist or an individual snapshot in time. So it's still a developing science and an imperfect one, but it is one that has made a huge difference to literally tens of millions of women.
That's amazing, isn't it?
So that's all that we're going to talk about for now. We'll be back very soon to talk a little bit more about the kind of long-term impacts of being an IVF parent, because that is we've talked about the nuts and bolts of it, if you like, but there's a lot more to think about it when you go into an IVF process, about what it's going to mean in terms of risks, impacts, how it's going to affect you, how it might affect your parenting, and some more of these kind of squishier things to think about when you're if you're thinking about doing IVF, or if you're facing that situation. So
lots to unpack.
That's going to come very soon, I think. That's it for this week's episode of the Science Baby podcast.
Please let us know if you have any more questions about the IVF process,
because I could talk about it for days.
Join the chat on Instagram, or find this and every podcast episode at thesciencebaby.com.
See you next time.